Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hi, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of Listen Up podcast, where I feature leaders in healthcare. Today, we are going to feature Dr. Marwan Sabbagh. He is an excellent neurologist. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Hearing Center, where we only treat ears. I am the E of ENT. I am passionate about hearing loss because I lost my brother twice. I lost him first to hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then again to the brain tumor itself. I've performed over 10,000 surgeries. I've taken care of thousands of patients with hearing loss, and we're dedicated to treating hearing loss better. I've written a book called Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about that, go to www.listenuphearing.com. If you want to learn more about my clinical practice, go to www.azhear.com. Today, I have Dr. Marwan Sabbagh. He is a board-certified neurologist and is a leading expert in Alzheimer's and dementia. He attended Berkeley undergraduate, University of Arizona for medical school. He did his residency at Baylor and did a fellowship at University of California, San Diego. He is at the Cleveland Clinic, Camille and Larry Ruvo Center for Brain Health in Las Vegas. He's going to be relocating to the Barrow Neurologic Institute shortly. He's authored multiple books and has several hundred peer-reviewed journals. He is a rock star in dementia and Alzheimer's, and we're here to talk to him. I'm very happy to have him today. Dr. Sabbagh, welcome.
Thank you for including me, Dr.
Sure. Oh, my pleasure. Can you tell us what's your journey to being an expert and having a passion about Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so that's a question I get asked from time to time, and people, I'm not racing against the clock. My parents are still alive and they're still whole, at least cognitively. It was the fear of getting old. When I was in college, I had this deep-seated fear of getting old. And I said that Alzheimer's disease is the embodiment of everything sad and destructive about getting old. And I decided very early on, 18 years old, that I would dedicate the entirety of my life and career to managing and taking care of people with Alzheimer's. And that's how I got into it.
Yeah, I guess, when we look at people with hearing loss, that deep-seated drive is independence, right? The desire to, one of the reasons people treat hearing loss is frankly, they're afraid that their kids are going to say, hey, mom, dad, you're losing a step. You're not as sharp as you want. You're not going to be able to take care of yourself. So it's interesting. It's kind of the same driver. Are you deeply independent? I mean, is that part of who you are as a person?
Yeah, I want to live the totality of my life in its fullest extent, and I don't want any of it to be compromised from physical or cognitive disability.
And that's great. I mean, I think it's awesome. We all, as we know, it's seemingly in both of our lives, I think we're about contemporaries, right? 50 becomes the new 40, 60 becomes the new 50. I mean, it seems to be keeping on, at least from what I hear and I want to hear, it keeps on moving up, right?
It sure does. It sure does.
So let's say somebody has a family member who they suspect has a cognitive issue or dementia. What should they do? What are the steps, or what should they look for? What would you give their advice?
The first thing I would say is don't wait. If you're saying, dad or mom she repeated that, or getting lost in their neighborhood, don't attribute it to forget, just they're depressed or sad. If there's an issue and you're noticing it, it's a change for them, go get it checked out. And I will say to you, I know a lot of doctors, though, primary care, they take mom and dad to the primary care and like, it's just, he's depressed, he's sad. And the doctors themselves don't take it seriously. So that's number one. Number two is, understand that the changes in the brain that lead to Alzheimer's dementia can start 20 years before the first day of forgetfulness. So by the time they walk into my clinic, the dementia is the end of the disease, not the beginning of it. So it's kind of like, metastatic cancer, really effectively. By the time they come in the door, it's already spread. So I think, again, don't wait, because if there's a problem, we should tackle it head on, early on, get it thoroughly evaluated.
So you're saying the dementia is the product of the process that's been going on for 20 years. Is that right?
That is exactly right.
And so that process is detectable how?
So this is a critically important question at this moment, Dr. Sims, because the fact is that, until now we had relied heavily on clinical screening measures or clinical screening evaluations, but we're now seeing a transformational moment in the field. This is not science, not research. is transformational in that we are now starting to detect biologically the changes of Alzheimer's. So we had PET scans, which are not covered by Medicare. We had spinal fluid analysis, which is covered by Medicare. But now we're looking at the reality of blood tests, which are actually starting to win their way into the clinic, although they're not routine or they're not common and they're not widespread. But the idea of a blood test, like a hemoglobin A1C or a PSA for a man, that's coming now, not 10 years from now, not 20 years from now, that's coming now. Those kinds of tests are becoming rapidly available. So we're in a transformational moment. Imagine you go to the primary care physician and it's like, my memory, you have your annual Medicare screening test. My memory's either not as good as it was, or the doctor decides to do a brain memory test and it's not good. Instead of just deciding what to do next, they just get a blood test to see if you have Alzheimer's changes. And if it's abnormal, then you would refer on. If it's normal, then you don't refer on. These are the kinds of transformational moments that are occurring, and you will see become routine within the next few years.
Well, I'm being serious. It's a bit of a joke, but that's a lot easier than a colonoscopy.
Hell yeah! People joke to me. Like I said, we're probably contemporaries. You and I, they used to say, "Why do you go to neurology? It's diagnose and adios." We don't do that anymore. We're actually looking at Alzheimer's. I should say, all of neurology is a therapeutic field, and Alzheimer's will join the pack here very soon.
Well, certainly, if you can get people further upstream, meaning before the end organ manifestation of it, you'll be able to try therapies that would then prevent progression. Like you were saying with metastatic cancer, it's kind of the game's kind of over if somebody's got it all out their body. I mean, there are things we can do, but stopping it before it goes there is really what the goal is.
And eventually, so I see, if we get to it, the Alzheimer's is going through this transformational process, but we could see within a few years detecting it before you have symptoms, okay?
Right.
And then either vaccinating it away or doing something to prevent you from ever getting to dementia. That's not that far off. Maybe people think of that science fiction, but that in my world, that these people we're having those discussions and doing those studies now.
That's great. So are you doing those types of blood tests in your clinic experimentally?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Quest Diagnostics rolled out a test. It was not that good in terms of sensitivity and specificity, but there's a company out of St. Louis called P2N, which now has a brand new blood test called the Precivity blood test. And yes, we are starting to roll that out here. And I expect that will be widely available in the country by 6 months from now. There are two cut technologies right on the heels, nipping at the heels of this company. One is called the Quanterix Simoa platform, and then the other one's called the MagQ IMR platform. So, this first one is not going to be the only one. Imagine, like everything else, there'll be several products on the market within a few years.
Competition's good, right? Because they'll put each other and we'll get great innovation, and rapid marketplace will make them innovate. They'll get there.
That's correct. That's exactly
with
right.
pricing pressures too, which will be great too.
And costs will come down too.
Right. That's awesome. That's really interesting stuff. I had no idea. So I wonder if we'll talk offline whether or not I knew.
Okay.
I'll leave that at that. So, as you know, my passion is hearing loss. What role do you see hearing loss in dementia? We were talking in the pre-interview about sensory issues.
Right.
Can you speak a little bit?
Interestingly enough, the intersection was only kind of looked at recently. We've seen the same population that gets Alzheimer's and other dementias is the same population that has a sensory deprivation through hearing loss. But we never kind of intersected the two until quite recently. We just said, yeah, you have them and you have them both. But now we're seeing, of course, that hearing loss and the sensory deficit can make the cognitive deficit worse or appear worse. So they may, in fact, there's a few studies just come out rather recently saying that they tested people with the hearing loss. They did the cognitive neuropsych testing. And then they did the same test after they corrected the hearing, and lo and behold, 25% improvement on cognitive testing. And people are like, oh my gosh, maybe we should be correcting for their hearing before we give them the test. And that is, that sounds obvious to you because this is your job. But to us dementia people are like, oh, that's a revelation. We just had the light bulb going off.
Yeah, it's more painful than that. I'll just throw you the statistics. So only 20% of people with hearing loss treated.
Oh my goodness, that's
And
terrible.
only a third of them have it treated appropriately, which means only 8% of people are treated. And that's why I decided to pursue. I mean, this has become kind of my passion. I mean, I do surgery, but this is really where I think that there needs to be more physician leadership in terms
Yeah.
of people. So, yeah, I don't know if you, but there was the big. So in our field, what really got it, what lit up was the Lancet study group paper in 2018, where they basically showed hearing loss is by far the most modifiable factor to improve your cognitive abilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I was just blown away. I mean, it was like, I don't know, 5-fold greater than like cholesterol, exercise, diabetes control, no smoking. I mean, it's the only thing that's better is like, I think childhood education is a better thing to prevent cognitive stuff. That obviously for most of us is beyond us at this point.
Yeah.
So you see any role of screening people for hearing loss? I mean, you kind of touched on it.
I think that has not made its way into clinical practice routinely, but it would make a lot of sense. And particularly, we talk about the Medicare annual visit.
Right.
We in the Alzheimer's space kind of are taken aback that, you're getting osteoporosis screening and depression screening and cholesterol screening and colon cancer screening, but you're not doing cognitive screening. And so we in the Alzheimer field think that should be corrected. But I think you have a better shot at getting your hearing addressed, but maybe you should do both routinely, right? Cognitive and hearing. But it hasn't made its way into practice yet.
Yeah, the hearing space has had challenges. We don't have really good data to demonstrate that, that the screening is worth it. And then the other issue is hearing aids are not covered by Medicare. And so I think there's a fear of maybe opening some of this up in terms of who can and can't do it. But I agree 1,000%. I mean, and so for me, the thing that's amazing is, one, patients don't perceive their own hearing loss because they compensate with speech reading and contextual. And I know that a lot of physicians don't realize people have hearing loss because they communicate. I say to patients, just because you communicate effectively does not mean you hear well. It just means you compensate for your hearing loss.
Yeah.
So, or as unfortunately, it's kind of like in your space, you don't know what you don't hear, which is kind of like you don't know what you don't remember.
Right.
Because I mean, So outside of that, what other things would you advise people to do to keep their brain health and keep, what are the other things? Obviously, this emerging blood test will be huge for people. But what other, so, when you were sparked at 18 and you wanted things to be high quality, like exercise, I assume, but what other things would you tell people?
So, you talk about the Lancet Commission. There's
or other things like when somebody comes in and says to you, Dr. Sabbagh, I want my brain to be better. I mean, is it Sudoku or is it, what is it?
So it's all of it. So if you follow the National Academy of Sciences, Medicine, and Engineering, there are 3 official recommendations: blood pressure management, cognitive stimulation, and physical exercise. Those now have sufficient evidence to say they're enough that you should recommend them to protect the brain and cognitive health. But, the Lancet Commission now recommends a lot of things. You talk about sensory deprivation. Right. So we think that we know there's plenty of evidence about those 3 things that I recommended. The data on diets is kind of soft, trending, but soft.
Heart disease, though, if you keep your heart healthy, right? Blood pressure down.
The data on supplements is soft, but there are things you can do. Physical exercise is as good as prescription medication. Hard stuff. Okay. Cog stim, brain games. We understand that socialization. We understand that managing mood. We understand that taking care of things like sleep apnea. We understand that certain diets are probably protective. So it's not just, oh my God, I'm forgetful. I'm going to go to Costco and buy the whole row of supplements and that's good enough.
Right.
I'm 55. And I know that cognitive health starts today. And I exercise every day and I eat right every day. And I try to get a good 8 hours of sleep. And I believe I drink the Kool-Aid that I'm telling people. I actually do it myself.
You're walking the walk.
Running my family, I still do it because I believe in cognitive health.
Yeah, I think the cognitive, I mean, if you say your 3 recommendations, right? Low blood pressure, physical, it's the cognitive one that for a lot of people, they're kind of trying to figure out. well, what is that, right? Because I had a relative who thought that she got a lot of exercise because she would go out and hang the laundry on the laundry line every day. I was like, well, that's not actually exercise. That's just doing your activities of daily living. That's not getting your heart rate up. So what type of things would people do?
For physical exercise, we would basically follow the American Heart Association guidelines. So 30 minutes of moderately vigorously exercise 5 days a week, or 150 total minutes a week. Okay. Would be good. So when I tell people to build that into their life, change is hard.
It is.
And I'm saying, taking your dog on a walk and sniffing every bush does not count as exercise. You need to, if you're going to walk, right? Okay. And I usually try to be prescriptive about it. I say, and when people have been sedentary and all of a sudden you tell them, like every other doctor, you got to start exercising. Guess what they do? They're like, yeah, I heard that before. And they don't do it. So I say, start with 10 minutes a day, right, every day, like it's medicine, right? 10 minutes a day, and add 1 minute a week. So this week, 10 minutes a day, next week, 11 minutes a day, and walk with purpose, robust, physical, and keep going. So you can, in 6 weeks, you're at whatever, that's 42 minutes or something, or I should say 16 minutes, and then you can get, and then your body's used to it after you get there, after a while. So.
No, that's great stuff. I mean, I guess, the other problem is I'm not sure surfing Facebook or looking at Instagram is cognitive stimulation.
So it has to be something interactive and that stimulates the brain. So there's become a cottage industry in the brain games and brain stim space. I think the best one, and I have no ownership, just tell you that I'll disclose these things. Brain HQ, I think, probably has the best one. But remember, Lumosity was the one that caught everybody's imagination. But, Lumosity is one of dozens. And so brain games in general are the things that I would say. My dad is 88 and he's trying to learn a new language. And I'm like, good for him.
That's great.
Stuff like that. So try to do something that your brain wouldn't normally do. And just numbing yourself with Facebook or Instagram is not necessarily it.
How about conversation? Does that count?
As long as you're recalling them and staying with them, yeah, sure. I think you need to do something that would be beyond the norm. Like, for example, I have no patience for Sudoku, but I try to read 4 books at a time because I get bored reading them, and I try to remember 4 books at a time. So that's what I'm doing to keep cognitive.
That's a lot. Yeah. I mean, well, it depends. Especially if they're all like same genres, that'd be very hard. But if they're
very different.
No, that's good, because I'd have a really hard time all of a sudden. I don't think I could do 4 murder mysteries at once or something like that. That would be a little hard. So that's good. So, you touched on a little bit, like, where do you see the field going, like 10 years from now? Do you see therapeutics for these markers, or what do you see?
So I think we're going to undergo 3 generations of change in the next decade. One is we're in the moment in time that I've been talking about for years, where we're going to transform Alzheimer's disease from a terminal disease, as you and I know it, to a chronic disease. This is the diabetes and HIV of our time. Okay. I graduated from medical school 30 years ago, and I remember very distinctively in medical school, if you had diabetes, you were going to get amputated, blind, and on dialysis. That was like done. Now you get diabetes and you live normal life, and that's
you get a pump and it gets regulated, and
and that's become normal. I believe Alzheimer's will be in that it's the beginning of the transformative moment. For all of the firestorm of controversy around this new monoclonal antibody, and understand I have been in the middle of that conversation.
I didn't catch that today, by the way.
Yeah, I want to say to this audience, this is not one drug. There are 4 drugs right behind it that are pretty much doing the same thing and doing it maybe potentially even better. So stay tuned. We're going to have 5 or 6 new drugs on the market in a matter of 2 or 3 years. It's a very exciting time to be in the Alzheimer's. So
are there like brain coaches? Are there people who are doing this type of thing where they're coaching on all fronts of this?
Oh yeah.
But
centers of excellence that I've been part of, and we have more of in Arizona. are doing these very things. Good news for this audience is Arizona is one of the hotbeds of Alzheimer's study, research, and treatment.
So how does that work? You get assigned somebody? Is it?
Yeah, you'll be assigned to a doctor.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Second thing is that we're going to be able to biologically determine people at risk.
right.
And third thing we're going to be able to do is maybe prevent Alzheimer's outright, so you'll never get to it. I think that's maybe a little bit down the road, but not impossible.
Do you see it as then you would have to find a few pathways of etiology, right?
Yeah, and those are biologically we're understanding. People don't understand. We know a lot more about the disease than most people think, and way more than Dr. Google tells you is going on. Everybody gets their information from Google. There's a lot of things going on, and this week it's funny. You and I should have this conversation because our major global trade meeting, the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, is going on as we speak in Denver this year.
Is it virtual?
It's hybrid. So 90% of the attendees are attending virtually and 10% are there in person. And I would, in fact, normally I'd be there, but COVID kind of had a say in what I did.
Yeah. Our academy meetings in Los Angeles, I'm not sure anybody, not because they don't want to go, but I'm just not sure.
Exactly.
Well, this has been great. So I really appreciate it. He's an expert on Alzheimer's and neurology. It's been great to have him here today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for including me.
Thanks. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.